Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Jason Harper inherited his grandfather's rustic farmhouse in the quiet outskirts of Riverview, Wyoming, he expected a life of peaceful sunsets and the joyful neighs of two aging horses. But when a relentless HOA president claimed authority over his land, Jason's idyllic dream turned into a battle to protect his family's legacy. Jason Harper's world shifted dramatically the day his grandfather, an old-school horseman with a stubborn streak of independence, passed away. At 35, Jason wasn't new to hard work. He'd spent his life balancing city living with rural roots, but taking on the responsibility of his grandfather's 8-acre property felt monumental. The sprawling land located on the outskirts of Riverview, Wyoming, was more than just a plot of earth. It was a family legacy, rich with history and filled with memories of his childhood summers spent learning to ride, mend fences, and care for the two horses that still roamed the property. After the funeral, Jason made the bold decision to move his wife, Sarah, and their 10-year-old son, Caleb, from their cramped apartment to the farmstead. Sarah, a teacher, and Caleb, an animal-loving boy, were hesitant but supportive. Jason, on the other hand, felt a mix of excitement and apprehension as he loaded up their belongings. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was stepping into enormous boots, his grandfather's, whose shadow loomed over every decision he would now have to make. The house itself was a charming yet worn 2-story farmhouse with peeling white paint and a wraparound porch overlooking a weathered barn. The barn housed the two aging horses, Duke, a grizzled quarter horse with an easygoing temperament, and Bella, a spirited mare who could still kick up dust when she wanted to. Despite their years, the horses remained an essential part of the property, a living connection to the land and its history. Their arrival was met with a bittersweet sense of renewal. Caleb's laughter echoed across the fields as he explored. Sarah planted flowers near the porch, and Jason set about restoring the barn's old hinges. Yet, amid this new chapter, a shadow crept onto their sunny horizon. The second week brought an uninvited guest, Carla Wilson, president of the Maplewood Estates Homeowners Association, a woman whose sharp features matched her personality. She arrived in a shiny black SUV with two equally stern-faced members of her board. The three of them stepped out as though preparing for a hostile takeover. Jason met them near the porch, a mix of curiosity and irritation flickering across his face. Carla wasted no time, flipping open a clipboard filled with official-looking papers. "This property," she began in a clipped tone, "violates multiple HOA regulations, including the appearance of the barn, unapproved animals, and, most critically, failure to maintain aesthetic harmony with the neighborhood." Jason blinked, caught off guard. "Sorry, but this land isn't part of any HOA," he said firmly. "It's private property, always has been. My grandfather made sure of that." Carla's expression soured. "That's not accurate. Maplewood Estates expanded its jurisdiction 5 years ago. This property falls within our oversight now." Jason's patience frayed as he explained, again, that his property had been excluded from the HOA's boundaries since before Maplewood Estates existed. He even mentioned the deeds stored in his grandfather's old desk, ready to prove his point. But Carla wasn't interested in explanations. She handed him a thick packet of bylaws, complete with highlighted sections, and a friendly letter outlining a fine for noncompliance with HOA rules. "You have 30 days to address these issues," she said before stalking back to her SUV. Her board members nodded in silent agreement as they followed. As Carla's vehicle disappeared down the gravel road, Jason stood frozen, the papers clutched in his hand. Sarah stepped onto the porch, concern etched on her face. "What was that about?" Jason exhaled sharply, his calm demeanor cracking just slightly. "Trouble." Though he tried to dismiss the encounter as a misunderstanding, an unsettling thought lingered in the back of his mind. Carla Wilson didn't seem like the type to let things go. What began as a seemingly misguided attempt by Carla Wilson to enforce HOA rules quickly morphed into an unrelenting campaign of pressure and harassment. Jason initially chalked up her demands to a bureaucratic misunderstanding, but it became clear within days that Carla had no intention of backing down. The letters started coming first. Almost every other day, a thick envelope arrived in the Harper's mailbox, stamped with the HOA's official seal. Each letter outlined a new alleged violation. The barn's peeling paint was unsightly and did not meet community standards. The horses were hazardous to public safety. Even the freshly planted marigolds Sarah had added by the porch were criticized as non-compliant landscaping. Alongside these accusations came escalating fines, starting at $250 and climbing to thousands of dollars. Jason ignored the first few letters, assuming Carla would eventually realize her mistake and move on. But the onslaught continued, with increasingly stern language threatening legal action. Then came the ominous addition: failure to comply may result in a lien being placed on your property. Tensions in the Harper household began to rise. Sarah tried to reassure Jason, saying, "It's just scare tactics. She can't actually do anything." But Jason's gut told him otherwise. He'd heard enough stories about HOAs overstepping their bounds to know that some of them operated like small-town dictatorships. The last straw was when Caleb returned from playing outside one evening, clutching a flyer he'd found pinned to the fence. It was an anonymous HOA notice accusing the Harpers of endangering neighborhood children with their unsecured animals and unsafe property. Jason's anger boiled over. He drove to the town records office the next day and dug through old property maps, deeds, and zoning documents. As he suspected, his property was explicitly excluded from the Maplewood Estates HOA boundaries. Armed with this evidence, he sent a certified letter to Carla and her board, firmly stating that their claims were baseless and instructing them to cease their harassment. But instead of retreating, Carla doubled down. A week later, Jason noticed two unfamiliar cars parked near the edge of his property. From his porch, he watched as a group of HOA members, led by Carla, appeared to be conducting some sort of inspection. Armed with clipboards and cameras, they pointed at his barn, gestured toward his house, and scribbled notes. Jason stormed out to confront them, but by the time he reached the gate, they had already driven off. Deciding enough was enough, Jason installed two security cameras, one facing the driveway and another overlooking the barn and horse paddock. If Carla or anyone from the HOA tried anything again, he'd have hard evidence. Meanwhile, the harassment ramped up in subtler ways. Jason's mailbox was knocked over in the dead of night. Trash bags were mysteriously dumped along his fence line. Even the gate to the horse paddock was found unlatched one morning, though fortunately, Duke and Bella hadn't wandered far. Jason filed a police report, but without concrete evidence, there was little they could do. The pressure wasn't only external. Jason's family began to feel the strain. Sarah worried about Caleb, overhearing their heated conversations about Carla and the HOA. Caleb himself started asking questions like, "Why does that lady hate us?" Jason assured him everything would be fine, but he wasn't sure he believed it himself. One evening, as Jason reviewed the latest HOA letter threatening a formal assessment of his property, Sarah sat down beside him. "You need to fight this," she said firmly. "She's not going to stop until we push back harder." Jason nodded. He had already consulted a lawyer who confirmed what Jason suspected. The HOA had no legal authority over his land. The lawyer encouraged him to keep documenting everything and advised him to wait for an opportunity to catch them in the act. With the security cameras in place and his evidence piling up, Jason felt a renewed determination. "I'm done playing defense," he told Sarah. "The next time they step foot on this property, they'll regret it." Little did Jason know, that opportunity was closer than he expected. It was a crisp Saturday afternoon, and Jason and his family had taken a rare break from the chaos, driving to a local farmer's market to enjoy some much-needed time away from the property. As they strolled through the aisles admiring fresh produce and handmade goods, Jason's phone buzzed. The notification was from one of the security cameras installed on his land. Opening the app, he saw a live feed of Carla Wilson standing in his driveway, clipboard in hand, flanked by two other HOA board members. Jason frowned, watching as the trio strode confidently past his no trespassing signs, pushing open the gate to the barnyard without hesitation. The sight immediately put him on edge. "Sarah," he said, showing her the video, "they're on the property." "What are they doing there?" she asked, alarmed. Jason watched the feed as Carla and her accomplices wandered around the property, gesturing toward the barn and taking photos of the horses and the house. The men occasionally wrote notes on their clipboards, pointing at areas of the barn that had visible wear and tear. Jason felt his blood boil as he saw Carla approach Duke and Bella, her posture smug and self-assured. "She's trying to provoke something," Jason muttered. "This is the so-called formal assessment they've been threatening. Only they didn't bother to get permission or even wait until we were home." Jason didn't hesitate. "I'm calling the cops," he said, dialing the non-emergency number. He explained the situation, and the dispatcher assured him that officers were on their way. As they rushed home, Jason couldn't shake the image from the camera feed. Carla, boldly standing in his barnyard as though she owned the place. Then, just as he checked the live feed again, the situation took an unexpected turn. On the screen, Jason watched as Carla approached Bella. She spoke animatedly to the other board members, her tone unmistakably condescending, even without sound. She reached out to pat Bella's neck, smiling smugly as she did so. But Bella wasn't having it. The mare stomped her foot, flicked her ears back, and then, without warning, bunched her muscles and bucked. The kick wasn't full force, but it was enough to knock Carla off her feet. The camera caught her falling backward into the dirt, clutching her leg and yelling in pain. Jason couldn't help a grim smirk. "That's what you get for harassing a horse," he muttered under his breath. By the time Jason and his family arrived at the property, chaos had unfolded. One of the HOA members was trying to help a limping Carla back toward her SUV, while the other stood awkwardly nearby, holding a clipboard like a useless shield. The wail of approaching sirens filled the air, and moments later, both the police and an ambulance pulled up. Jason stepped out of his truck, calm but resolute, and approached the officers as they exited their vehicle. "Thanks for coming," he said. "This is my property, and I've got video evidence of these people trespassing." Carla, who was now sitting on the ground with a paramedic examining her ankle, pointed a trembling finger at Jason. "This is your fault," she shouted. "Your dangerous animals attacked me. You're going to jail for this." Jason refused to be rattled. "Officer," he said, turning to the nearest cop, "I think you'll want to see this." He pulled up the camera footage on his phone and showed it to the officers. The video clearly displayed Carla and her entourage entering the property without permission, inspecting the barn, and ultimately causing the incident with Bella. The lead officer reviewed the footage carefully, nodding. "This is pretty clear-cut," he said. "They had no right to be here." While the police spoke with the other board members, Jason calmly provided his account. He also handed over the stack of HOA letters and threats he'd received, as well as copies of the documents proving his property's independence from the association. Meanwhile, Carla's protests grew louder. "I'll sue you," she screamed as the paramedics helped her onto a stretcher. "This isn't over. You'll regret this." Jason crossed his arms, his voice steady. "You're the one trespassing on my land. I've done nothing wrong, and now I have proof." One of the police officers approached Jason after speaking with Carla's companions. "We've got everything we need here," he said. "We'll file a report and document this incident. If you'd like to press charges for trespassing, we'll support it." Jason didn't hesitate. "Absolutely," he said. "She needs to be held accountable." As Carla was loaded into the ambulance, still muttering threats, Jason felt a strange sense of satisfaction. The tables had finally turned. With the footage, the legal documents, and the police on his side, Jason knew he was no longer on the defensive. The battle was far from over, but the tide had shifted in his favor. The confrontation at Jason Harper's property marked a turning point, but it was far from the end. In the days following the incident, Jason worked closely with his lawyer, ensuring every piece of evidence was meticulously documented. The camera footage, police report, and records of harassment from the HOA painted a damning picture of Carla Wilson's actions. Meanwhile, news of the trespassing and Carla's humiliating encounter with Bella spread quickly through the Maplewood Estates neighborhood, causing a stir among the residents. True to her threats, Carla wasted no time filing a lawsuit against Jason. Her claim alleged that his property was hazardous, his animals were dangerous, and his lack of adherence to HOA standards posed a threat to the community. Her attorney framed it as an issue of public safety, demanding damages and further insisting that the barn and fencing be removed to comply with HOA bylaws. Jason, however, was more than ready. His attorney countered with a lawsuit of his own, accusing Carla and the HOA of trespassing, harassment, and defamation. With the support of the police report and video evidence, Jason's case argued that Carla had not only violated his property rights, but also attempted to enforce regulations that had no legal bearing on his land. The trial quickly became the talk of Riverview. On the day of the hearing, the courtroom was packed with curious locals, including several residents of Maplewood Estates. Many of them had grown tired of Carla's heavy-handed leadership, but had been too intimidated to speak out. Now, seeing her on trial, they silently cheered Jason on. Jason's lawyer opened with a detailed presentation of the facts. The video footage was played in court, showing Carla and her two accomplices blatantly ignoring no trespassing signs, inspecting the barn, and provoking Bella. The recording of Carla's threats from the ambulance further weakened her credibility, painting her as an overreaching and vengeful leader. Carla's lawyer attempted to shift the narrative, portraying Jason as a negligent landowner whose property endangered the community. But this argument crumbled when Jason's attorney presented the deed, proving that his property predated the HOA by decades and had been explicitly excluded from its jurisdiction. A former town official who had overseen the development of Maplewood Estates also testified that Jason's land had never been subject to HOA governance. The final blow came when a veterinarian testified that Bella's behavior was a natural response to an unwelcome intrusion and that the mare had no history of aggression. By the time Jason took the stand, the courtroom was already leaning in his favor. He described the months of harassment his family endured, the baseless fines, the invasive inspection, and the emotional toll it had taken. His calm and straightforward demeanor contrasted sharply with Carla's increasingly erratic outbursts during the proceedings. At one point, she interrupted the testimony to shout, "This man is a menace," a remark that earned her a stern warning from the judge. In the end, the verdict was decisive. The court ruled in favor of Jason, finding that Carla and the HOA had acted unlawfully. Carla was convicted of trespassing and harassment and sentenced to 14 months in prison, along with a substantial fine to cover Jason's legal fees. The HOA was ordered to pay Jason $75,000 in damages, a figure that included compensation for the emotional distress inflicted on his family. The ruling sent shockwaves through Maplewood Estates. Carla's reign as HOA president came to an unceremonious end as the board was forced to restructure. Several residents who had long felt stifled by the HOA's authoritarian rules began petitioning for more transparency and fair governance. For Jason, the outcome was more than a legal victory. It was a personal vindication. Standing on his porch the evening after the verdict, he watched Caleb play with Duke and Bella in the paddock. For the first time in months, the oppressive weight of the conflict was gone. Sarah joined him, resting her hand on his arm. "You did it," she said, a proud smile lighting her face. "You stood your ground." Jason nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I just wanted to protect what's ours," he replied. "Now we can finally move on." The house and land, once a source of contention, now felt like a sanctuary again, a place of peace and resilience where his family could build their future, free from unwelcome interference. The fallout from the trial rippled far beyond the courtroom, leaving a lasting impact on both Jason's family and the Maplewood Estates community. For Jason, the victory was not just about proving his legal rights, but about reclaiming his peace of mind. The months of harassment, legal battles, and tension within his household had been exhausting, but the outcome reaffirmed the importance of standing firm against injustice. Life on the farmstead began to settle into a calm rhythm. The ominous letters from the HOA ceased, and Carla Wilson's name became a cautionary tale whispered among the residents of Maplewood Estates. Jason reinforced the perimeter of his property with clear, no trespassing signs and upgraded his security cameras. It wasn't out of paranoia, but rather a quiet assurance that he would never allow anyone to challenge his boundaries again. Sarah and Caleb also began to feel the shift. Without the looming presence of Carla and the HOA's threats, Sarah embraced the farmstead fully, transforming the once neglected garden into a vibrant array of flowers and vegetables. Caleb returned to playing with Duke and Bella, his carefree laughter filling the air. Jason often found himself standing by the fence watching his son and feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the simple joys that had been restored to their lives. The Maplewood Estates community, too, experienced a transformation. Carla's imprisonment and the HOA's public disgrace emboldened the residents to demand change. For years, the association had operated with unchecked authority, intimidating homeowners into compliance with arbitrary rules. Now, with Jason's case as a precedent, the tide began to turn. A group of reform-minded residents took steps to restructure the HOA, calling for greater transparency and fairness. They reached out to Jason not to apologize but to thank him for his stand. Some even asked for advice on how to handle their own grievances. Jason, while still cautious about getting involved, offered words of encouragement and shared the importance of documenting everything. The monetary compensation Jason received from the HOA was put to good use. He repainted the barn, upgraded the fencing for Duke and Bella, and repaired the porch, bringing the property back to its former glory. The farmstead became a symbol of resilience, admired by neighbors who saw it as proof that one person's determination could bring about meaningful change. Perhaps the most unexpected outcome was the sense of unity that began to form between Jason and the residents of Maplewood Estates. Formerly seen as an outsider, he was now regarded as a kind of folk hero. At community events and casual gatherings, neighbors would wave, stop by for friendly chats, or drop off small gifts of gratitude. Even Caleb found new friends among the children from the neighborhood. For Jason, the journey had been grueling, but the result was undeniable. His family's sanctuary was secure, and his stand against injustice had inspired a community to reevaluate what it meant to live peacefully together. He had not only protected his family's legacy, but also laid the foundation for a future where his neighbors might finally coexist without fear of overreach. As Jason Harper stood on the wraparound porch of his grandfather's farmhouse, watching the sun dip below the Wyoming hills, he allowed himself a rare moment of stillness. The journey had been long and fraught with challenges, but the outcome was worth every step. The land, the house, and the legacy of his grandfather were now firmly in his hands, untouchable by anyone who sought to take them away. The victory was more than legal, it was deeply personal. Jason had faced months of intimidation and harassment, but he'd never wavered in his belief that what was rightfully his was worth defending. Looking back, he marveled at how the conflict had shaped him. He had grown stronger, more resolute, and perhaps most importantly, more connected to the values his grandfather had instilled in him: hard work, resilience, and a deep respect for the land. His family, too, had come out stronger. Sarah, who had been his rock through the entire ordeal, now looked at their home with a sense of pride and belonging. Caleb's laughter filled the air once again as he played with Duke and Bella in the paddock, free from the fear and confusion that had clouded those early months. The farmhouse was no longer just a place to live. It was a sanctuary, a symbol of their perseverance. The neighborhood had changed as well. Maplewood Estates was no longer under the thumb of an overzealous HOA president. Jason's case had not only exposed the abuses of power, but also sparked a movement among the residents to reclaim their voice. Reform swept through the association, creating a more transparent and cooperative environment for everyone. While Jason remained cautious about getting too involved, he was proud to know that his stand had inspired others to demand better. Jason's gaze swept over the fields, the barn, and the home he had fought so hard to protect. He felt at peace knowing he had honored his grandfather's legacy, not just by preserving the land, but by ensuring it remained a place of freedom and respect. Sometimes, Jason thought to himself, you don't choose the fight, it chooses you. And when it does, you stand your ground. With the golden light of sunset washing over the farmhouse, Jason turned and walked inside, ready to embrace the new chapter of his family's life, a chapter that would forever be shaped by the strength they had found in the face of adversity.